Hi, I'm Shannon Simons, and this is my second attempt to film Chapter 11 because I've got kids and they call. It is July, and in Oregon, it's going to be illegal starting today and tomorrow to go outside without a mask on. So I'm in my backyard, and don't think it's like the Garden of Eden. It's not. This hydrangea grew all on its own in Oregon because Oregon's like that. It was in a pot, and I came out in the spring, and even in the snow, it just kept growing. It was bizarre. My backyard is tiny. I have chickens over there. I have sand toys, buckets, bicycles, and a barbecue and a fire pit. So nothing special. I'm reading Safe House, the book that I wrote, a chapter at a time. If you've been following along, we're on chapter 11. And at the end of each chapter, I talk a little bit about what inspired the book and about what I've learned as an advocate to support the people around us, or you, if you're a survivor. So chapter 11, rules. I'll just give you a short recap. Grace is an advocate. Hart is the officer that she really likes. Emily and Kelly are survivors, and Amber is Emily's daughter. Burke has been Emily's abuser, and he was up in the woods but returned, and law enforcement thinks he's still lost somewhere in the woods. So chapter 11 is rules. Burke lay in the back of Emily's SUV as she backed out of the garage and onto the street. A blanket was thrown over him. Waving at the officer parked next door, she drove down the hill. Greta and Bjorn were buckled into car seats. Greta's feet were resting on Burke. The baby started to scream. Emily tensed and looked at the officer in a rearview mirror. "Shut him up," Burke growled. Emily was afraid that Burke would try to discipline the baby. He always complained that she was too soft on the kids. She looked at Greta over her shoulder. "Greta, take care of your brother," Emily directed. Greta pulled a bottle out of the bag and put it in the baby's mouth. He sucked hungrily. Emily's body relaxed when the crying stopped, remembering he hadn't been fed for hours. She realized he was probably starving. Emily did exactly as Burke told her, dropping him in the trees a half mile from his father's logging company on Old Highway 30. Fingering her stitches, she watched him in the rearview mirror retreat in the distance. Suddenly, she became aware that the baby was crying again. He would have to wait. She had to get further down the road. And then a little break, and we're with Burke. Burke pulled out his cell and called his father. "Dad, did you hear?" "Of course I heard. What did she do now?" His father, Edward Anderson, sounded angry. "It was Emily. It was Amber who called the cops on me. The girl's out of control. You need to step up to the plate and take charge. How many times do I have to tell you to be a man?" Burke felt stupid. One hand on his hip, his head down, he kicked a rock in the road. His father sighed, exasperated. "Well, what's done is done. Where are you now?" his father demanded. "Half a mile down the road from your office." He paused. He tried to find a good way to put it to his father. There was no good way. "They're looking for me, Dad." His father swore. "I can't believe this. Do they know who you are?" Burke's shoulders slumped. Here we go, he thought. He checked out while he waited for his father to finish his diatribe about his name and how important he was and how the whole country should be grateful he kept people employed. "I'll call Tom," his father said. "I'm coming to get you." "Then what?" Burke asked. "Tom's a good lawyer. He'll know what to do." There's a break, and we're back with Emily's daughter Amber at the high school. Mr. White watched the sea of kids flow loudly down the hallway of the small high school. His lanky body leaned against an old brick wall while he twisted his CTR spinner ring without thinking. Something was nagging at him. What was it? He high-fived a few of his favorite kids and exchanged words with a few more, all the time trying to tune inward and figure out what was bothering him. The skin prickled on the back of his neck, and he saw the tiny girl with her hood on, obviously avoiding him. Everything else seemed to go away, and for a moment the hallway was empty and silent, except for the retreating back of her head. He peeled himself off the wall and began to follow Amber. Amber was almost there, shoulders hunched, hoodie up, sleeves pulled over her hands. Books clutched against her chest. She spotted the door to the math classroom through her lowered eyelashes. It was open. Slipping through, she headed to the back of the room. "Amber," Mr. White said. Whipping around, she snapped to attention and her heart stopped. "I need to see you in my office." He didn't know why he needed to see her. He just knew it was important enough for a still small voice in his head to shout a little. Amber's mind raced. Had something happened to her mother? Did he listen to the police scanner? Did one of the kids tell him? How did he know? Panicked, she simultaneously wanted him to tell her right this second and didn't want him to tell her at all. She felt like a deer in the headlights whose legs were on automatic. And then we go over to Grace and the Family Crisis Center. The Family Crisis Center met around a kitchen table. Grace's boss, Eunice, was a thin, energetic woman with a family. Her husband loved her, was the love of her life, but had been gone for 10 years, as in left for Vegas with another woman. A wry sense of humor and sarcasm covered her major brain and deep mean streak. The woman was a genius with grant writing and money. Her whole life was her job, and she was good at it. Grace wasn't sure she ever went home. Eunice had a nose for people and could spot a manipulating client at 1,000 paces. However, she didn't recognize it when staff was buttering her up. Grace had a domestic all night, Eunice said. Someone has to follow up. Grace, tell us about it. Grace gave the group a short, fast version of Emily's assault, the family, and her work with them. What does the victim want to do? Karen asked. She wants to stay. He has all the money and resources. She believes he would win the kids in court. His family isn't a name I recognize, but I guess they're known locally, run a small but very profitable business, and can afford an attorney. She has no friends or family she feels she can turn to. What about the kids? I don't think she understands the impact the abuse is having on them. Are all the children his? Eunice asked. Amber isn't, but he's been her only father figure most of her life, and he could sue for psychological parenting. With the right lawyer, he'd win. Is this the first incident? Mindy asked. No, just the first reported incident, Grace answered Mindy, and then went on. The kids seem unfazed, which says to me this happens a lot. It seems Amber is the parent. Emily is too distracted by Burke to parent. The police will forward their report to the Department of Child Welfare, and I think in this case we should work to help Emily through the child welfare process. I know we don't have to, but I'm sure this won't be the last assault, and the kids will continue to be exposed to it. There'll be more reports to the state. What kind of mother lets this happen? Mindy shook her head. Grace, Eunice interrupted her thoughts. You'd better type your report now and then get some sleep. It's not safe to call the victim of the perpetrator if the perpetrator is still at large. We can't risk him picking up or seeing us on caller ID. We have to hope she calls or waits to do a follow-up contact when they picked him up. So some years ago, Oregon, what inspired this chapter was some years ago that Oregon made it a felony when you assaulted somebody in front of a child. And the hope was to reduce domestic violence, but actually what happened is women stopped reporting. They stopped reporting because child welfare was showing up and removing children, and women were losing their children for being victims, literal victims. And even those who chose to go to shelter sometimes still had child welfare involved in their lives, or women that were trying to do the right thing. In Emily's case, she feels totally outgunned. He has the money, he has the family, she has nothing. He can get an attorney. Either the state will get her kids, or an attorney will take her children. And I think that was probably true at the time this book was written. We've gotten smarter. I don't know how it is in your state. Every state is different. In the state of Oregon, we've given advocates privilege, and they are able to listen to survivors without reporting to child welfare. We are the only non-mandatory reporters in a survivor's life. They can actually talk to us about anything. And even when there are times when I've heard stories that were really difficult to hear, and I felt like, man, somebody's got to do something. We learned to trust that survivor and to trust that they know what is best for their family at that point in time, which is hard to do. On the other hand, child welfare can, with the right frame of mind and the right systems in place, support a mother, give her the funds that she needs to relocate, give her access to transportation, maybe to reunify with support systems that she's lost during the abuse. So look at your systems where you live and trust the survivor that you are related to, talking to, friends with, and check it out. If she says to you, I could lose my children, don't say you won't, because that's not true. She could. And it's not impossible for the perpetrator to take the children away in court. So I guess the last thing that I want to share with you, I made myself some notes upside down in the book, is that no one knows a survivor's story better than a survivor. And once again, and I know I've said this before, check your judgment. Check your judgment at the door. One of the questions you can ask is, what do you need to get to be safe? What is it you lack? You know, if you ask Emily, it might be finances for an attorney. If you ask Kelly, it might be she's saving for bus passes. So if you have someone in your life, or if you're working with people, that's a good question to ask. What do you need? It doesn't mean you have to provide it. Maybe you can help them call the National Hotline and get to their local resources and find what they need. So that's it for this week.